Well, friends, the Nintendo Switch 2 is finally upon us. All baggage aside, it's nice to actually have this system in my hands and be able to check it out for myself after all of the months and years of rumors, speculation, and analysis. Now, I'll be sharing my thoughts with you on that experience soon enough, what I came away with, and how I'm ultimately choosing to navigate the stickier aspects of the system's execution. However, there is a trend I'm noticing in the midst of all the Switch 2 coverage, and I just want to take a moment to address it today. This is Little Akiba Games. I'm Patrick. Welcome back to the shop. As a Switch YouTuber, among other things, I find myself watching the content of other creators in this space, and I'm finding a common narrative that I'm not really on board with. Specifically, the winding down of legacy Switch coverage, and the associated implication that one era is ending and another is beginning. The air of finality isn't intended to be somber, but it's hard to take it as anything but, considering what a wonderful time in gaming and Nintendo history that the Switch represents, and all of the missteps Nintendo has already made with the Switch 2. I will maintain that the best case scenario is that the Switch 2 doesn't mark a new era for Nintendo at all, but rather a continuation of the last 8 years. Admittedly, we're off to a really rough start. Game cards are few and far between, with the cheapest nearly 3 months out from launch at a $60 price point. Tellingly, a recent interview with Marvelous Entertainment Brass implies that $50 is the bare minimum sale price for a Switch 2 game card to be profitable. There's a long way to go if we're ever going to have an environment like we do with the Switch, where a newcomer can take $200 or $300 over to Amazon and come away with a decent little starter library. Now, game key cards, such as they are, come in a little more economically, mostly around $40 to $50. But absent some very specific assurances from Nintendo that we have yet to receive, it's very hard to recommend making them a meaningful part of one's library. I'm not going to amass potentially 100 plus of these only to have Nintendo cut my access to them someday. The best way to not get the rug pulled out from under you is not to have that rug in the first place. This is something Nintendo needs to address post-haste, because something like an explicit commitment to perpetual online access or clarification of game key cards booting game data sourced from third-party archives would be huge. My investment in the system would instantly change considerably. Now, thankfully, everything about this situation is completely fixable. Publishers could opt, or be pushed by consumers into, pricing their games toward the low end of that $50 to $80 profit range for Switch 2 game cards. Nintendo could come right out tomorrow and clarify that game key cards are in no way reliant on Nintendo's servers for functionality at all, that it doesn't matter where the game data is sourced from if the game key card is present. Both prices and the proliferation of game key cards could be seriously wrangled if Nintendo just decided to make 16 and 32 gig game card specs available for Switch 2 games. Another solution that I haven't heard anyone bring up yet leans on the fact that the legacy Switch has a transcendent installed base and has years of support to look forward to because of it. This would allow publishers to ship games on cheaper, lower capacity Switch game cards, then offer a Switch 2 upgrade path. We're already seeing this with Final Fantasy Tactics and Fantasy Life I. This would circumvent the expensive 64 gig Switch 2 game cards, while still offering physical copies of games, albeit legacy Switch versions rather than Switch 2 copies. It's not perfect, but as compromises go, this one isn't terrible. I'd be on board with it. Friends, just take a moment with me to imagine a world where we don't even need to have this conversation, where Mario Kart World comes in at an admittedly frustrating but not unexpected $70 price point, where every game releasing with the system shipped on a proper game card, where the formula that made the Switch such a resounding success got future-proofed, enshrined into Nintendo's business model for years to come. A world where the launch was a pure, wholehearted celebration, a victory lap for the last 8 years of Nintendo history, and a party to welcome in everything to come, with no clouds hanging over it, no asterisks, no devils in the details to diminish or outright negate the excitement. We could have had it, and all Nintendo had to do was stay out of their own way. As it stands now, the Nintendo Switch 2 launch, which should have been impossible to screw up, will be forever compromised by exorbitantly priced games, the controversy of game key cards, and generally atrocious messaging. However, there's nothing wrong with a system that's so deeply cooked into its DNA that it can't be walked back later. The best analogy I thought of is that it's like taco night got cancelled, but we can take some relief in knowing that we do still have the stuff in the house to make tacos. The right combination of consumer backlash and poor sales of game keycards and overpriced games can fix all of this over time, meaning use your power to vote with your dollar. Historically, systems as wildly successful as the Switch have extremely long legs, especially if its follow-up stumbles. The PlayStation 2 nearly lived to see the PlayStation 4. The Wii outlived the Wii U outright, only seeing its final release in 2020, 3 years into the Switch. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Switch 2 is going to be any kind of colossal failure, but it clearly scratches a different itch. One that's suited for people who are a little more moneyed, a little more deeply invested in modern notions of gaming, a little less concerned with the long-term viability of a video game purchase. The legacy Switch still serves a purpose that the Switch 2, or at least the business model and delivery methods native to the Switch 2, does not. The more important takeaway here is that the legacy Switch continues to dodge a lot of its successor's baggage, and as noted a moment ago, could even present a solution for one of the Switch 2's biggest problems. If the Switch was a person, we'd call that job security. We have a situation here where the arrival of the Switch 2 might not just fail to close the door on the Switch, it could very well prolong the Switch by simply being so compromised that it necessitates a sanctuary for gamers from everything it's being compromised by. There's a real sentiment out there already that a lot of gamers are going to be willing to choose Switch game cards over Switch 2 game keycards, with publishers like Sega putting that choice right in front of us to make, here and now. There are also relatively inexpensive Switch games on these cheaper, smaller capacity game cards that will have Switch 2 upgrade paths. With its installed base of over 150 million users, it will see software support for years to come, not just the end of 2026 that Nintendo themselves are committing to. Even in the worst case scenario, even if the Switch 2 remains a premium priced device tragically destined to become more and more like its Xbox and PlayStation counterparts over time, the Switch will still remain a comfortable, welcoming representation of gaming at its best. Approachable, affordable, offering up a cornucopia of experiences taken from all of gaming's rich history for you to buy, keep, and enjoy for decades to come. There's a very real chance that with the launch out of the way, unless Donkey Kong Bonanza is somehow goated, and it sure doesn't look like it right now, sorry DK fans, I am already done buying Switch 2 games until Demon X Machina in 3 months. What I'm not even close to being done with is scanning Limited Run's website every paycheck for new Switch pre-orders, or grabbing older Switch games I want that I didn't get the chance to pick up on release, or continuing to support the Switch's ongoing software pipeline in general. This week, just days removed from the Switch 2 launch, I have pre-ordered or purchased 9 more original Switch games, and had an existing pre-order come in. Of course, there's a terrific irony in the fact that the Switch 2 takes this entire library and injects it with raw performance, courtesy of hardware these games have always craved. It's perfectly reasonable to buy a Switch 2 and completely ignore the exploitative software pricing and game keycard nonsense, only using it as an enhancement vehicle for the Switch software that you already own and/or will pick up in the future. It's remarkable how much better some of these games run on the new system, and partaking of it by no means commits you to buying Mario Kart World for $80 or a copy of Yakuza 0 that will never truly be yours. Friends, the Switch is not over. It's not even winding down. It's just entering a new chapter where its role is shifting slightly and may be defined, at least in part, by its relation to the Switch 2. In fact, its direct comparison to the Switch 2 may even secure its already well-established status as a forever console, joining the ranks of systems like the Super Nintendo and the PC Engine as platforms that you can invest in and still be actively playing when you retire, either entirely or just from actively buying into the game industry, which is exactly the kind of longevity I try to promote here. Certainly for the purposes of this channel, there's not going to be any recognized era transition here. Patrick on Nintendo will continue being a largely Switch-centric playlist, unless something happens pertinent to that kind of ownership and library building on the Switch 2 that demands my attention. There's not going to be some massive retrospective of the Switch, no grand farewell, because I know I'm not saying farewell to it at all, at least not anytime soon. And if you're here, I don't think you're anywhere close to saying goodbye to it either, are you? That's all for now, but I'll definitely have more to talk about soon. If you like this video, then please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. click the notification bell with the all option to make sure you know right away when the next video goes up, and really do this for every channel that you enjoy, even if mine isn't one of them. The YouTube algorithm needs all the help it can get. I hope to see you back here next time at Little Akiba Games.